Morning, everyone, and welcome. Kuyana, thank you for joining us for day 5 of AKAA Virtual 2021, the 48th annual meeting of the Alaska Anthropological Association. My name is Amy Phillips Chan. I'm the president of the association, and it is my pleasure to be zooming in this morning from snow-covered Sitnasak, where I'm fortunate to live and work here in the town of Nome on the traditional homeland of the Nupiat, who have been careful stewards of the land and waters surrounding the Seward Peninsula for generations. So with us this morning, we have Dr. Heather Igloliote, who will be offering a special keynote presentation, and Dr. Joshua Lynch, a board member, who will be helping to moderate the session. So good morning, Heather and Josh.
Good morning.
After the presentation, there's going to be a time for a Q&A, and this will be an opportunity if you'd like to ask any questions. Please feel free to type those into the chat box, raise your emoji hand, or unmute your mic so you can visit in person. However you feel most comfortable. We are glad you are here. So now it's my honor to share a few words about our keynote speaker, Dr. Heather Igloliote. I was fortunate to meet Heather a few years ago in connection with the Otsego Institute for Native American Art History. And she's been so inspiring just with the creative projects and initiatives that she's pursued and this kind of really team-oriented approach that she's taken to those. So Dr. Igloliote is an Inuk curator and art historian from Nunatsiavut, which is the Inuit self-governing region of Labrador. She holds the Tier 1 University Research Chair in Circumpolar Indigenous Arts and is an associate professor in the Department of Art History at Concordia University, which is in Montreal, Quebec. Dr. Igloliote is the principal investigator for the $2.5 million 7-year project, Inuit Futures in Arts Leadership. And this project aims to empower circumpolar Indigenous peoples to become leaders in the arts through training and mentorship. She also co-directs the Indigenous Futures Cluster in the Maliu Institute for Arts, Culture, and Technology, where she works with collaborators and students to explore how Indigenous people are imagining the future of their families and communities. Dr. Igloliote has been a curator for almost 15 years and is currently the lead guest curator of the inaugural exhibition of the new Inuit Art Center titled Inua, which is scheduled to open at the Winnipeg Art Gallery later this month. She publishes frequently and has co-edited special issues of journals, including Public 54, Indigenous Art, New Media and the Digital, and Rakar, Continuities Between Eras, Indigenous Arts. So as the Alaska Anthropological Association really endeavors to advance more inclusive and holistic approaches to understanding lifeways in the circumpolar north, Dr. Igloliote brings really valuable insight into recognizing deep connections between Inuit knowledge, relationships, and art. So this morning, she is going to lead us in a conversation about moving towards an equitable future for Inuit communities and artists. In her presentation, Thinking Beyond Geographic and Institutional Boundaries, Circumpolar Art Future. So welcome, Dr. Igloliote.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Shall I start sharing my screen?
Yeah, go for it.
Great. Then I don't need to look at myself so much. That's the that's the plan. It's so wonderful to be here this morning. I apologize that I'm not going to look directly at the screen because I have my because I've got my PowerPoint here and my notes to my left. So I'm going to be looking back and forth, but hopefully the images will keep you all interested and engaged. As Amy said, I'm Dr. Heather Igloliote. I'm an Inuk from Nunatsiavut. This is a very bad map of the circumpolar world that is from Wikipedia, and then another map on the side of Nunatsiavut. Oh, sorry, Nunatsiavut. I grew up in Happy Valley Goose Bay, but I'm an Inuk on my father's side. My mother is a Newfoundlander, and my father's family is from Nain and Hopedale. They are, my grandparents are Matthew Igloliote and Susanna Mitsuk, came, of course, Susie Igloliote. And my great-grandfather, Solomon Mitsuk, was also from the Hopedale region. Well, he was born on the land just outside of Hopedale, as was my dad. Today, I just want to start by thanking Amy and everyone else in the association for inviting me to be a keynote speaker. I hope that I do a good job. I'm not talking, the Otsego Institute where Amy and I met is definitely an institution that brings together the disciplines of anthropology and art history. And my former supervisor, Ruth Phillips, I believe coined the term arthropology. Maybe it was hers, maybe not. But certainly something that I was trained in, but I'm not really talking about today. There's a lot of contemporary art and contemporary practice that I'm talking about. But I did look at the schedule. The building behind me, the virtual building behind me is Kayak. It's the new Inuit Art Center that's opening at the Winnipeg Art Gallery this fall. And I'm actually coming here today from Treaty 1 territory in the homeland of the Métis Nation opening here this month, sorry, not this fall. And I'm coming to you from here today. I've actually been in Winnipeg since August of this year, opening this new building and leading the curation of the inaugural exhibition. And today you're going to see a little sneak peek of some of that. I tried not to share too many images of the installation because we're keeping it pretty hush until March 25th when the building opens officially to the public. And so all this past week or so, the last 2 weeks, we've been preparing for the virtual components of the opening. As I'm sure many of you working in institutions have also been, I've said the word pivot so many times this year, but we're pivoting to virtual and trying to think about what ways we can install the exhibition and then make sure that large numbers of members of the public can see it, and especially those living in circumpolar regions who have, at best, uneven access to the internet, and as you all know, sometimes terrible access to the internet. And so how do you have a virtual exhibition that is meant to be for Inuit when we have all these different barriers to access in the Arctic? So the building is opening soon, and I was really glad to see on the schedule that there were panels around not just critical museology, but virtual museum practices, as well as ethics in institutions and training. And I'm going to talk a little bit about all those things today, because my presentation is about that idea of thinking beyond imposed geographic and institutional barriers and thinking about how the arts can play a critical role in these boundary stepping practices. And so I'm going to start by talking about, or I'm going to lead this presentation by talking about some of my own work in this area. I'm going to do a little bit of reading and a little bit of speaking off the cuff. I know that different associations prefer different formats, and so I thought I'd do a hybrid presentation and make everybody happy, or not. So in the presentation today, I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to begin by acknowledging whose research that this is built upon, because it's not all my knowledge, of course. And I want to give credit to the Inuit Circumpolar Council for doing a lot of the work of bringing together Inuit people. And when I say Inuit, I'm referring to, that is a kind of a shorthand of this presentation for the Circumpolar Inuit family. When I say that in Canada, within Canada, I mean, you're looking at the screen here, the Inuvialuit, Nunavut, Nunavik, and Nunatsiavut regions that makes up Inuit Nunanga. And then the sort of broader, everything in yellow on the side of your screen there, the broader Inuit regions, of course, include Alutiiq, Inupiaq, Inuvialuit, Kalalit, Yupik, and so on and so on. There are many diverse peoples, just as there are dialectical distinctions throughout the entire Inuit world. But I use that term because the ICC is called the Inuit Circumpolar Council. And so perhaps in the future there will be a better or more specific or less generalized way of framing this. But for now, I hope you'll bear with me. The Inuit Circumpolar Council formed in the 1970s in response to threats to Inuit Arctic sovereignty over lands and waters, threats of Arctic resource extraction happening without consultation of the people who lived in the Arctic for thousands of years. And we know that still goes on today. discrimination that Inuit faced in Greenland, Russia, Canada, and Alaska, and the lack of sustainable economies in the New World that was rapidly engulfing us. Over the last almost half century, through the formation of Inuit political organizations such as the ICC, but also Inuit Piirikkanatami and other nation and region-based Inuit organizations, Inuit have made significant strides throughout the North. Collaboration, cooperation has been a keystone in our success. The Inuit of Canada have already begun the process of reclaiming what was diminished during more than a century of Arctic colonization through the settlement of all 4 territorial land claims and the institution of new forms of government. So my region is the last to settle its land claims in 2005, but we are also the first to become self-governing. We have a one-to-one government relationship. Nunavik is a regional corporation. Nunavut is its own territory. The Inuit region is also functions similarly to Nunavik. In 2017, Inuit from Canada, Greenland, Alaska, Chukcha, and came together in Ottawa to discuss cultural sustainability, food security, and conservation through use. The summit resulted in the commitment, and I'm sorry, you might hear my dog coughing in the background. I have no power over what happens. She's a senior dog and is likely to interrupt this presentation multiple times. The summit further called for a unified Arctic voice on Inuit rights to the sustainable use of Arctic flora and fauna and the move towards circumpolar wildlife without borders. Dwayne Smith, chair and CEO of the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation and chair of the ICC's Wildlife Management Summit noted, quote, rights to harvest the Arctic living resources are embedded in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Inuit rights are being eroded by environmental change and public perception. Inuit are, quote, one people living in 4 countries with very different political realities and experiences in exercising our harvesting rights, and we are committed to support and learn from one another. And this always reminds me of an example of my dear friend and colleague, Marjorie Tawbone, who's of course from Alaska, who recently told a story about she was traveling into the Yukon in order to participate in a moose hide tanning workshop, and she had both the moose hide and a jar of brains in her traveling with her in her suitcase. And she got stopped at the border, and they were debating on, like, can you bring moose brains across the border? And they ultimately, I mean, she's an extremely smart and charming person, so I think that she convinced them to let her through. But also the argument that I believe she made was that, you know, the moose don't respect the borders. They come and go as they please through here. So if the brain's on this side or that side, you know, what does it matter? I think there's a lot that we can learn from these kind of colloquial examples that teach us something about how to circumnavigate these borders. Just over a year ago, I was further excited to see that to this end, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, the Canadian Coast Guard, and ITK announced the creation of a standalone Arctic region of the 4 regions of Inuit Unangat for the purposes of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. As the changing climate opens up this region to greater fishing, shipping, resource development, and other interests, DFO, the Coast Guard, and ITK want to ensure that Inuit and all Indigenous peoples, as well as those residents of our region of the North, are at the center of the department's decision-making in the region. And so the unification of our voices, rather than having us, because many of us, you know, Nunatsiavut is a part of Newfoundland and Labrador, Nunavik is a part of Quebec, the Inuvialuit region is part of the Northwest Territories. And so having one unified voice really does go a long way to being able to protect those waters instead of having the provinces sort of fight amongst themselves around who has access to what. This step, which advances reconciliation with Arctic peoples by providing them with more collective agency over their homelands, is a welcome new example of a re-emerging unity of the Arctic. As ITK President Natan Obed said, quote, sorry, go lie down, Vienna. Sorry, 1 second. We welcome, as Natan Obed said, we welcome the creation of a new Arctic region that is inclusive of these regions and the specific policy needs of Inuit and that is staffed by Inuit. Amelie Jensen, head of Division Ministry of Fisheries and Hunting of ICC, has noted, quote, Inuit must work together from the community, state, regional, circumpolar, and international levels to exert and strengthen Inuit hunting rights, or Inuit will have no access to Arctic living resources in the future. I feel strongly that if we are going to achieve this dream of Inuit sovereignty, and by sovereignty, I don't just mean political sovereignty or sovereignty over lands and waters, but also the ongoing health and well-being of our communities, preservation of our languages, culture, knowledge, and traditions, and our self-determination over all of this and our right to decide what is best for ourselves and to bring that into reality. If we're going to achieve that Inuit sovereignty throughout the circumpolar world, we need to firmly and permanently establish our cultural sovereignty. We need to preserve and fortify our Inuit languages and dialects, providing them in this country with the same accord that we give to English and to French, and foster and support the continuance of our tradition, cultural practices, and innovations. I believe that the arts provide one way of thinking or imagining a future beyond both geographic and institutional boundaries. I'd like to consider in this presentation how the arts can play a determining role in our efforts to reassert Canadian Arctic and circumpolar cultural sovereignty by affirming and asserting our longstanding traditions, highlighting our cultural continuities, creating space for Inuit art in Canada and international contexts such as Alaska and elsewhere to flourish through a coming together, and providing a platform for Inuit to write and rewrite our own culture and art history. So today I'm going to be discussing how I came to be interested in looking beyond the borders, because of course in my own research, I started very closely focused on my own community and the needs of my own people. And I have seen over the last 15 years of my career how that work has kind of grown and expanded. And I'm really interested for us now. You know, for me at first, there was a lot of a siloing between just regions within Canada. And I'm excited to look forward to not just unpacking those borders, but to really think about us as one family around this part of the world. And then also to think through how we are critically engaged with, maybe not directly related to, but engaged with the Sami people as well. Oh, sorry. I first became interested in trying to create a platform for the exploration and celebration of international Inuit art several years ago. And I want to begin by acknowledging that this has a long history of global circulation and exchange, stretching way back through time. It begins with our trade and exchange with other Inuit throughout the vast circumpolar world, and of course, other indigenous peoples, contact with Vikings potentially 1,000 years ago, and finally trade with European whalers, fishermen, military explorers, missionary trappers, and so on over the last several hundred years, leading up to the establishment of Canada just 150 years ago. So even our contact with the world long predates the history of this country and of America as well. I want to note that I'm also not the first person to undertake this work specifically in the arts. As you can see here, this is an exhibition catalog for In the Shadow of the Midnight Sun, Sami and Inuit art, which brought together Inuit artists and Sami artists in a touring exhibition that was organized and shown in both Sami and in Canada. It was organized in Finland and held at the National Gallery of Canada in 2008 when I saw it while I was a grad student, actually. And it is shockingly hard to find images from this exhibition online, and I'm in Winnipeg traveling, so I could not scan photos out of my catalog, but here are some poorly documented ones that I found on the internet to share. There are lots of other examples of such efforts, but today I'm just going to focus a little bit on my own work. So, I wanted to start with like a bit of a preamble to this, because in 2016, I co-curated with Britt Galpin, who's the editor of Inuit Art Quarterly, and Mark Turner, who's a circumpolar film theorist, a festival called Inuit Blanche Circumpolar Night Festival. I wonder if any of you were here. I don't know. This is, that's me in the background, sort of blurry in the background. This is a local Inuit dance group. This was a one night only arts festival that was organized in conjunction with an international Inuit Studies conference that was held in St. John's, Newfoundland, and co-produced with my government, the Nunatsiavut government. And so we thought for one night, seeing how there were already a lot of people coming to the conference, and we could build on that, because you all know how incredibly expensive northern air travel is. And so we thought maybe we can build something here and have some synergy around the number of people who are coming in, and also the audience that we're bringing in to St. John's. St. John's, if you're not familiar, is the capital of the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, but it is not what I consider, what I would think of as a particularly Indigenous space. And so to be in the city for 5 or 6 days, even though there's an Inuit territory in the province, Nunatsiavut, I certainly never felt like I was seeing a lot of Indigenous peoples when walking around downtown St. John's. So it was kind of magical for the takeover of those days, October 6th to the 10th, I believe the conference ran over a long weekend. And this event took place on the Saturday night of the conference, but, just all week long, seeing so many Inuit faces, just passing people on the street was, it's kind of a vision of a future where Indigenous peoples, Inuit people are everywhere. Oh, I don't know why that keeps doing that. The night festival included art classes and workshops. That's actually my brother, Mark, in the red jacket. He's a artist. He's a professor at Emily Carr University, and he was doing live drawings, pet portraits of people who could come down and have their dogs drawn with a kamotik. And so he actually built the kamotik, and he and my dad did. And the pet portraits, of course, are there. It's kind of hilarious to see, a little schnauzer or something tied onto a kamotik. But while he was doing the drawings, he was talking to people about the centrality of Inuit dogs to Inuit life. And so talking a little bit about the impact of what it was like to go through the mid-20th century dog slaughter, the disappearance of Inuit sled dogs, which you may or may not be familiar with that history. If you were not, I recommend the film, Qimmit, Qimmit. It's an NFB film that should be free online. And it really beautifully explores this really troubling history in our past where Inuit were moved off the land and became sedentary. And so this was kind of a playful way to get people to come out and interact and bring their dogs and to get these wonderful portraits done, but also to learn a little bit of what is a largely hidden Canadian history. We had live carving demonstrations. That's Billy Goche and Kuzi Curley. There were also groups that came in to show about how to work with sealskins in a traditional manner. There was Inuit fashion took over some shop windows. We partnered with a couple of clothing stores that we had sealskin coats and contemporary styles, as well as other contemporary manufactured clothing. There was lots of food. This is a red berry. We partnered with the local Friendship Center to do some catering. And then also Barry Pottle, who's an Ottawa-Miut artist, showed his works, Foodland Security. You're going to see them later in the presentation as well. And then another one of my brothers, I have lots, but who was a chef, made these really gorgeous Arctic char and fish roe canapes that were served that night. Cousine Van Huvelen, who is from Nunavut, did this installation of Avatax. These balloons are really, really fabulous. They were just installed in the gallery. And then there was also live performance. That's Lakalu Williamson Bathory and Vinnie Karatok doing separate performances on the same stage, rotating throughout the evening. Interesting though, we were also bringing together not just Canadian Inuit. This is the first time that I started working with others from around the Circumpolar Inuit world. This is a work by Tanya, Lucan, Linklater. It's an Alaskan artist now based in Northern Ontario. We showed her dance and performance work. And then this is an image of 6 throat singers from across Inuit Nunganga who had never throat sang before together. We brought them together for a week and they did a whole workshop. And then they did probably the most moving performance I've ever seen in my life, because they were comparing our traditional songs, but learning the regional variances of them. So how, a song about mosquitoes or boiling water might change from place to place as it's being passed on. And then they did this performance in the round where they kind of turned and sang with each other. And it was just beautiful. My parents came to this one and then didn't go to any other events that night. They just stayed for all the same performance over and over. And then, of course, there's also the aforementioned Marjorie Topone again, who did a project called Neon Kakani. This is her in collaboration with Jenny Williams, who's another artist who was exhibiting during the festival. And all night long, as you can see here, Marjorie was giving people neon tattoos to kind of celebrate and bring attention to Inuit visual culture and practice. Following that, I attended the Arctic Art Summit in 2017. This was the first of a series that bring together 8 countries around the circumpolar world, of course, including representation from Alaska. And this is the first. The second one, this first one was held in Harstad. The second one was held in Rovaniemi. And the next one will be held in Canada. It was supposed to be here. It's supposed to be this coming spring, but of course that has been pushed off because of the pandemic, but hopefully we'll be able to host it in 2022. And I hope that many of you will come to see it. I believe I'm going to be leading the organizing committee, but it was a really transformative event for me. If anyone was there, they had a series of lectures and talks, but also performances and artistic practices. There were exhibitions. This is another exhibition that brought together artists from all around the circumpolar world, bringing Sami and like, I think a Inuit artist is Brian Adams on the far left. And then in the red in the center, that's Maria Helander, who's a Sami artist. We'll see her work later. She's from Finland. Yeah, so here's close-up of Brian's work in that exhibition. I also met Alison Akuchik-Warden for the first time, and that was a really important meeting to me. I was just kind of blown away by their brilliance. They did the Ancestor from the Future performance, and I'm going to return to this a little bit because I've commissioned her recently to, we brought her into the Inuit exhibition that I'm going to talk about at the end of the show to revise and revitalize this project. And that led to the exhibition Among All These Tundras. So after the Arctic Art Summit in 2017, in 2018, I was invited by the director of the Ellen Gallery here in Montreal, or there in Montreal. I'm in Winnipeg. I was invited to curate an exhibition, and I brought on two really brilliant graduate students that I have the privilege to work with, Carissa von Haringa and Amy Prouty. Carissa's work is looking at circumpolar archival work, including contemporary artists who work with the archive. And Amy Prouty is doing research on urban Inuit artists and the idea of I can't remember what the word she uses in her research, but the flow of artists and other Indigenous peoples back and forth from the north. So not really thinking about it in terms of like urban and northern-based peoples, but appreciating that artists, because of the nature of institutions in the Arctic, many artists move. You move for relationships, or you move for higher education. You go back home for family or for other opportunities, or, and then how people kind of move back and forth their whole lives, and really looking at that phenomenon that seems particularly potent in the circumpolar world for lots of reasons. So the exhibition, Among All These Tundras, has a title drawn from an illustrated poem called My Home is in My Heart, by the famed Sami poet Niels Aslak Valikpa Ailohas. Sorry, I obviously do not speak Sami, and I apologize for my pronunciation. It features contemporary art by 12 Indigenous artists from around the circumpolar world. The regions from which they hail throughout Inuit Nunanga and Sapmi, or Inuit Nuna and Sapmi, share histories of colonialism and experience its ongoing legacies today. These lands are also connected by rapid movements of cultural resurgence and self-determination expressed through language, art, and even the land itself. Many of the artists featured in the exhibition find themselves moving frequently between their homelands, urban centers, and other circumpolar communities, or traveling for international exhibitions and residencies. The artists include Asinayak, Kablusiak, Cousine Van Huvelen, Takerlik Partridge, Barry Pottle, Lakalu Williamson Bathory, Inutek Storch, Kara Legrand, Maria Helander, U.R. Nango, Alison Akuchik-Warden, and Sonia Keeler-Combs. This mobility often reflects the demands and opportunities of the art world, despite the acknowledgement that for many, and to quote the poem, their heart remains in their home. Drawing together a diverse range of artistic practices, including film, video, photography, sculpture, textual installation, performance, and mixed media, the works in Among All These Tundras invite viewers to contemplate relationships between textual and embodied Indigenous knowledge, humor and resilience, sovereignty and self-determination, and the collective responsibilities to Arctic life and land. This is the work contributed by Sonia Keeler-Combs. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of the major themes in the exhibition. One of the major themes, of course, is language. And that continues to come up because language, of course, is both something that is at threat and then also is so critical to the transference of culture moving forward. As Clifford Geertz aptly states, it is not merely a tool of communication, but a complete culture system. Its irreplaceable words, vocabularies, and grammatical structures both embody and transmit knowledge of the environment, living traditions, stories, and relations. The care inherent in the cultural revival of Indigenous Northern languages, carriers of knowledge and essential resources for healing, is therefore paramount to circumpolar artists and curators, as well as to lots of people too. It's important for legal document and education, for cultural workers, and for communities. Inuit Storch is an artist who also works through these kind of the resurgence of Indigenous stories, an artist based in Greenland who was looking at, these are in old films from the New Tale, these are a series of repurposed and re-engaged archival images that he brings to the fore with new sound and new mixing, doing these sort of dual channel videos that are sometimes mirrors and sometimes varied. Alison Morton's performance Siku Siku, which I actually saw for the first time at the Arctic Art Summit in 2017 in a totally different context, and then felt compelled to invite them to share this with us again, because the language is such a big theme of the exhibition. This seemed like a really perfect work. And if you have had the privilege of seeing this work performed before, it's in 3 stages. The first stage is on the left of our screen. Alison in the Usik t-shirt comes out and performs as one persona, and then after a short break comes out and performs as the second persona. Siku Siku is, Siku means ice, of course, but Siku has also become a slang term in her community for methamphetamine. And so this work looks at the parallel paths that people can take down roads of either substance abuse or cultural resilience and cultural survival. And she plays sort of 2 characters that are quite common in her community, or like 2 paths that were laid out to her when she was young, is one of the ways that she describes it. And her taking the, and I'm not at all saying that she was involved in substances at all. I'm saying that in her community, there were, that young people were doing different kinds of things, and she chose a path of cultural resilience, and but was trying to say that the person who does not take that path is not any less of a community member or a valued person or someone who has knowledge or is valuable, and trying to bring back, I think, and really share that feeling of having a lot of love and care for everyone in the community, and wanting everyone to be a part of that resurgence that's happening. In the second part of the performance, she starts teaching everyone language, and going in the wrong direction. And the third sort of act of this performance involves Alison teaching language to everyone in the audience, which was a really magical thing to experience in the gallery, because people started learning to count along and getting like pronouns and other things that were coming together. And then they took the rest of the time to kind of write words that were meaningful to them out onto this block that was also used as a performance platform. Carol Legrand, Sami artist from, I want to say Sweden, did and contributed this other work that builds on language called Look Who's Talking. This is a series of short films that explore identity in a very humorous and a little bit self-critical way. Again, Barry Pottle's Foodland Security series. This is a work that talks about food sovereignty in the Arctic and about the availability of country food to Inuit living in southern Canada as well. And sort of, we always think about the difficulty of food sovereignty in northern regions, but then he as someone who's lived in an urban center for a very long time, also thinks about the importance of making sure that our elders, people in medical care, people who have to travel for a variety of reasons, can still get access and connection to their culture through food. These are some photos by Inuit Storch included in the exhibition. I'll just show you a detail of one of these that builds on his continuing exploration of showing his world to the outside and inside. Sinayuk's rock piece. Sinayuk is one of my co-curators on the Inuit exhibition, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment. This is a really beautiful video. Another video work in the exhibition, Lakalu Williamson Bathory's Tamiga Nunalu Sikulu, My Body, the Land, and the Ice. This is a really fantastic work. If you've seen it, it comes in from the ice and you're watching these like sort of long expanses of this beautiful woman's silhouette, and you come up close, and then the very last scene is the one that you see in the bottom of the screen here, where she turns to you in full Greenlandic Unardi mask. Just kind of says, like, like it's a sort of a FU to any sort of idea of like how you could own the body, and just really confronting the idea of the primitive in the Arctic. Kablusiak, sort of following on that same theme, but in a very different way, takes stone sculpture and works it into everyday items. So here's cigarette and lighter. They've also carved, a Listerine bottle or a razor or pilot biscuits, like any number of things that just make that sort of take the idea of Inuit sculpture off of the pedestal and bring it into everyday experience, while also really questioning the sort of imposition of modes and methods that have been imposed upon Inuit artists to some degree in the Arctic artists, but I know in Alaska as well, that's there is also a strong thread of this. Here you can see some of this work displayed. That's also a tampon and a diva cup. Uar Nango, Sami artist from Norway, has made this series Sami Shelters, and we've included numbers 1 through 5 in the exhibition. The exhibition, by the way, was on tour across Canada for 2 years and now is making its final stop in New Zealand. It's actually opening in like 2 weeks late on a Saturday night for us, because it's Sunday afternoon for them at Pataka Art and Museum. And that'll be the final stop of the exhibition. It's really annoying that my presentation is not sliding through. Okay, here we go. And Maria Hellender is a brilliant filmmaker and photographer whose work I first saw in the Shadow of the Midnight Sun exhibition. To this project, she contributed 2 of her most recent short films, Dola Stala, To Have a Campfire, and the really breathtaking, beautiful Birds in the Earth. I hope you have an opportunity to see it if you haven't already. It is 2 Sami prima ballerinas, and they sort of move from the land and then into the city and travel to legislative buildings. And the films pick up on Maria's very keen sense of just a little bit of the absurd that draws attention to the absurdity of some of the treatment of Sami people, I believe. Tackling Partridge's work is really interesting in the exhibition because I think this work also speaks to the transcending of borders and the thinking very clearly around the kind of give and take among circumpolar peoples. Tackle's husband is a Sami reindeer herder. They now live in Canada, but they were living in Norway at the time of the creation of these works. And so, in one of these in particular, and I'm sorry my image isn't better, but that is reindeer hide and sealskin stitched together, but with grass between them, because we have cultural protocols about not bringing animals from the land and the sea together and so on. And there's a lot built into this work, but you can see there's emergency blanket and tarp and all these other it's coins and other things that have a lot of rich meaning and symbology. And so I want to switch gears for a little bit, and then I'm going to come back to exhibitions, but I think it's important at this stage to move into talking a little bit about the project I direct, Inuit Futures, and then I'm going to bring it all together in the end. This is one of the group photos. It's not the whole group, but it is a group photo from our year 1 cohort. We were awarded the grant in 2018. And so we're just in our 3rd year now of the project. We started in May of 2018. And so this is from our end of year 1, our first big event, which is our cohort trip to Venice to see Isuma, the Inuit film production group lead, represent Canada at the Venice Biennale. So I'll give a little bit of context and I'll show you some of our work. Since the late 1980s, and it's important because, and I'll just say this as a bit of a preface, is that when we're talking about curatorial practice, I recognize, as someone who's been curating for 16 years now, that there are limits to the impacts that curatorial practice alone can make, especially on the institutions that hold our cultures in trust. And so there needs to be, and I'm not the only one calling for it. There are lots of really important critical scholarship coming out right now. And I think there were even some sessions during your conference about the need for more Indigenous peoples to be in positions of power in institutions. And we frequently get short-term internships and other programs, which are really important for fostering emerging talent. But we need to see not just artists and not just exhibitions, but also management level and board level and educational staff and security and all the other things in institutions that make institutions not just safe spaces, but safe places where we are going to change and challenge a hundreds-year-old history of the colonial institution. The work has to be done. And so in order to do that, you need people on the inside and outside. And so I'm making a case right now for the embeddedness of people in institutions, but not just Inuit, not just Western institutions. We have many partners that are Indigenous institutions. So that's my little preface to this section. Since the late 1980s, many Canadian museums have changed their policies and practices towards exhibiting Indigenous arts and cultural history, employing curatorial strategies such as consultation, multivocality, and other forms of power sharing, which any anthropologist who works in museology here will be well versed in. We are also witnessing the rise of many prominent Indigenous curators and scholars across what is currently known as Canada and internationally. Our rallying cry has been "Nothing about us without us." Yet within the Inuit specific context, there is a significant gap between the strong representation of Inuit artworks held in museums and the number of Inuit in any gentle positions in those arts institutions. And I've been to museums all over the world, and they have, I've never been to a single institution, no matter what it's the theme of its collection, or, not just art institutions, but almost every institution I've ever been in has something from the Inuit world in their collection. So, if they're on the Pacific side, they have Alaskan ivories, or if they're on the Labrador side facing the Atlantic, they have Labrador ivories. But, I can go to Germany, Asia, Australia, there's Inuit work in every collection. So how can we have such overrepresentation in global collections and yet have so few Inuit in agental positions over what happens with our arts? For decades, Inuit have made up the highest per capita population of artists in Canada, with some communities reporting as much as 25% of the population of the community works in the arts, either part-time or full-time. And nearly all major Southern Canadian museums have modern and contemporary Inuit art collections in our country, often much larger than First Nations and Métis holdings, surprisingly. And yet there are almost no permanent full-time Inuit employees in any of our national and provincial institutions, and very few Inuit occupy academic research or professional positions in the arts. There's, of course, a number of notable examples, like Dr. Carla Justin Williamson, or my brother at Emily Carr, Lindsey Mcintyre at Emily Carr, Jocelyn Perinin, who now works at the Winnipeg Art Gallery behind me in my image, and a number of other emerging professionals. And of course, there's also some academics who are currently doing PhDs, like Nakalariak from Cape Dorset and Krista Uliuk-Sawatsky from Nunavut, who is currently studying at Carleton University. There's a lot of people, but relative to the amount of discourse that is produced around Inuit art, it's a very small percentage. I should also shout out Dr. Nadia Sethi, who I believe is on this call with us right now, and who's written a fantastic dissertation that sees chapters contributing to a new book that I'm co-editing. The more empowered that Inuit and Inuvialuit are to determine our own futures, the stronger our voices will be in how our arts, songs, stories, performances, and other artistic practices are protected, shared, and circulate within our Inuit communities across Canada and around the world. The sole purpose of the Inuit Futures and Arts Leadership Project is thus to foster, support, and increase Inuit and Inuvialuit leadership and participation in all of these areas. This project is supported by a 7-year Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council grant that enables us to train and mentor Inuit across both the North and South, in supporting emerging academics and arts professionals to become the next generation of researchers and leaders in our communities and across Canada within academia and the arts. I think we had 16 or 17 original partners. It continues to grow. We now have new partners such as UMA, the University of Michigan Museum of Fine Art, for example, has joined the grant over the last year, as well as other institutions in Canada and beyond. The important thing is that, our goal is nothing short of Inuit self-determination and sovereignty over our own arts. We want to seat at every table where our culture is at stake. The Inuit Futures Project is directed by 6 Inuit and Inuvialuit, all working in different areas. And I apologize that my face is probably over the corner with Alethea's text on it, but Takerlik Partridge, Jessica Kotick, Alethea Arnakok-Beryl, Jessie Tunglik, and Renata Arluk, and myself, of course. We covered very distinct different areas of the arts as well. So we've got arts administration, performing arts, museum leadership and archival practices, art history, the visual arts, theater, film. And so what we're trying to do is to create positions for Inuit and Inuvialuit, everything that's sort of a non-artist position in the arts, or something that is could be considered a leadership position. Together, we also represent all regions of Inuit Unanga and have expertise in all aspects of the project. Our alliance is both practical and political because we draw on our wide disciplinary and regional networks to contact potential post-secondary students and emerging arts professionals, or Ilinaktuit. That is sort of one of the only catches of this project right now, is that it's because it's funded by a Canadian research funding body. The conditions on this project are that we only work with post-secondary students. And I don't know what the situation is in Alaska. I assume not everyone who's tuned into this conference is from Alaska, but I'm sure you're all working in that context. But we don't have any universities in the Canadian Arctic. We have a number of colleges. We have like one new university, the Yukon, but it's brand new. It's a college that's into a university. And so art history programs are nearly non-existent in the North, as well as a lot of arts administration. Many colleges focus on things that are critically important, like and sort of urgent in the community, like infrastructure and was I muted? Sorry. Where did I leave off? Amy?
You were just talking about infrastructure. And,
yeah.
I mean, yes.
I don't know how I got muted, but anyway. So students are doing all these important work. So we have to really kind of reach out to our networks to find those Inuit and Inuvialuit students who are maybe studying in the North or South, or who go home in the summer times, and who are interested in training and being mentored into these new positions. As year 1 cohort member, Tom McLeod, and Tom is down in the left corner with the curly hair, said after our second annual gathering, the best thing this project has done is to bring together folks that are part of it all together. Concordia doctoral student Nak Alariak, who is in the purple blazer, adds, I had only ever met one other Inuk University student while I was at the University of Western Ontario. Having so many Inuit University students in the same place at the same time made me feel more comfortable and confident in myself and in Inuit studies in general. The impetus for creating this initiative rose from the troubling paradox that I've just explained, between the sort of people in leadership roles and those who are available to take up those positions. Because Inuit collections are often not the focus of institutions, unlike Kamayok, which is behind me, rarely do these institutions prioritize Inuit audiences or our engagement in our own cultural heritage, instead assuming that the audiences are primarily Holonon, non-Inuit. We have likewise been the subject of countless films, novels, plays, and studies, yet seldom have we had access to the same platforms and resources to become our own filmmakers, playwrights, or novelists, let alone to partake in the plethora of other interesting careers in the arts, like technicians and designers, collections managers, or magazine editors. We want to tell our own stories and lead projects that we dream up, not those imposed upon us. But the barriers to Inuit academic and professional successes are many. Geographic isolation from the South and from each other, access to education in our territories, the high cost of virtually everything in the North, and the history and ongoing legacies of Arctic colonization. Of course, Inuit have always continued to succeed in this field, and we do stand on the shoulders of those like Minnie Outla Freeman, Alutu Aipali, Jalai Papatsi, Zacharias Kunuk, and others who have kicked open a door for us. that had been shut to Inuit for many, many years. And it's our responsibility to keep that door open as wide as we can for more Inuit to come through, so they can also make and hold space for those who will come after them. As Concordia student Jason Sikowak said, Jason is, he's got the shaved head on both sides, white shirt on in this photo. He said in his profile on our website, Inuit Futures is helping me, and I in turn want to help other people once I'm through the program. And that's why we feel confident that this is a 7-year program and won't have to go on forever, because we know that when we put Inuit in these leadership positions, they are going to in turn around and create other opportunities for other Inuit who are coming up behind them. And so we don't need to do that. We don't need to be the leaders or the owners of this project forever. We can create a kind of a shared ethos, and we can feel confident that Inuit and Inuvialuit are going to go into the strong foundation that we have in our culture, where we understand that the way to lead is to serve. And so by bringing others into those fields and helping ensure their success as well, is what we know will be the perpetuity of this project. So I'll just show you a few things quickly, some of our activities. So the first year, this is us. We try to provide the students with lots of opportunities for professional development and as well as networking. So like we said, everybody's in tiny communities. They all think they're the only one. And we just want to bring them together and say, like, no, you can have a whole support network. Here's a bunch of people that can mentor you in anything that you're interested in. And then here's a lot of other students who are also interested in the same things that you are interested in. So at the top here, we are a panel speaking at a conference. We were doing performances and bringing together public events. Some of our artists at an exhibition opening that had been organized, and then another at an exhibition opening that she had curated. We also, like I mentioned in our first year, we brought the whole cohort of, I think it was we had been aiming to have 4 students in the first year, and then we had 11 plus 6 more that participated in the big project I'm going to tell you about. And so you can see this is us in Venice, working collaboratively, meeting with Sami presidents. That was a really special afternoon, and then getting to contribute to the first ever all Inuit issue of Inuit Art Quarterly, which you see in the bottom. That's what all the students worked on. And then we brought Jesse Tunglik in, who was our first artist in residence. He wanted to make the sealskin spacesuit, as you can see from this sketch. And he had this crazy idea. And so we brought him to the Canadian Space Agency with a whole group of these students who are CEGEP students, or like college students in Montreal. And together we all collaborate on this project. This is above and beyond the number of Inuktitut we worked with. This is the only photo we're allowed to take, because of course you're not allowed to take your cell phone into the very secure Canadian Space Agency. But from this workshop, Jesse built patterns and worked with Inuit seamstresses and others in order to create the sealskin spacesuit, which is also included in Inuwa. From this project, we also held the first ever Memory Keepers one. This is an incubator workshop where artists got together and created work in a short term. I'm not going to talk about this because I know I'm running out of time. But you can see some of the artists and mentors working together on projects to create new forms of collaborative digital and media art in the present. And then I'm just going to conclude for the next couple of minutes, just talking a little bit about what's coming up at Kamayuk. So Kamayuk, this is the new Inuit Art Center that's been built onto the existing Winnipeg Art Gallery. And this big project has been something that is bringing together everything I've been talking about in this exhibition. It is the curation of art that gets away from the siloing of Indigenous peoples according to their borders. It is an institution which is trying to transform itself from the inside out through the Indigenous Advisory Circle, which I co-chair with my colleague, Dr. Julie Nagum. And it's also a museum that is trying to really address its own legacies of colonization, its own implication in the way that it has collected work in the past, and where that work comes from, and what that history, that broader history of Inuit art is, and tries to think about how to not untangle it, but to make more visible the processes that have led to this institution being what it is, and trying to think through what's a way forward. This is not the whole group, but this is part of the Indigenous Advisory Circle, and it includes not just members of all of the Inuit and Inuvialuit regions, but also members from all across the province of Manitoba's Indigenous peoples. There are 7. The institution is on Dakota land, it's in Anishinaabe territory, and also Métis lands. Manitoba is touched by numerous groups, and we really want to be respectful of the fact that we were an Inuit institution being built on someone else's land. And so we formed this circle very early on in 2017, long before the ground was even broken for the new museum, which I've been on a lot of museum advisory committees, but usually they're formed in crisis. Some of you might have some familiarity with this. And so it was it's been a real pleasure and an honor to work in a different kind of a way and to let Indigenous peoples truly lead and have influence over the changing institution from the beginning, instead of in response to some sort of controversy or something that the museum has done wrong and now they need to fix. Just not to say that the WAG has a perfect history. I think we were talking about how it does have its roots, like all institutions, in colonial collecting practices. But one of the things that we've done, so the circle has been advising over many years on how the new building can change differently. One of the key things that we've done is we advocated for and were successful in hiring Jocelyn Perinin, the first Inuit curatorial staff member, as well as the creation of a position for a strategic director of Indigenous initiatives, who is a Métis person from the region, Julia Lafreniere. Julie is in the polka dot animal print shirt in the middle of the screen. And one of the things most recently we've done together is we're not just looking at sort of policies and practices and things going forward, but we also gathered first just to name the building, the Inuit Art Center. We decided early on that we didn't want it to be called the Inuit Art Center. We wanted it to have an Indigenous name. And then through this process that, as you can see, we had to conduct over Zoom, we would have done it in person, but that wasn't possible all last year. And so through a series of really enlivening and important discussions, we brought together circle members with Indigenous language keepers from all of the regional stakeholders, so all of the Indigenous peoples of Manitoba, as well as the North, and had these really generative conversations around naming, and ended up naming not just the outside of the building, but also giving an Anishinaabemowin name to the existing WAG building, and then renaming spaces in the old building and creating new spaces in the new building, where every language is included and respected in that naming process. So for example, the big gallery that I'm about to show you is called Kayak, which means sky in most of our dialects. And then there is another gallery, there's a mezzanine gallery that looks out over that, which was given the name Kijik, which is of course in another language, but also means big sky, or refers to heaven. And the visible vault, this is the dream for the visible vault. This space became named Igloliote. Igloliote means our relatives, and it came out of everyone talking about how excited they were to see the artworks come out of storage and to get to be together and to share space, to breathe the same air, to get to be celebrated and in the light, and sort of kept on these dark shelves like many archives are. And this is the reality. This is during installation. I think I'm allowed to show you these pictures. So this is the visible vault right now as it was coming together. It is now full of artwork. It's organized by community in the vertical realm, and it's shaped sort of like a big clover. And the public can't walk around inside of it. You can't just walk in and like take something off the shelf, but you can get tours of the space. This is 2 stories high, as you can see, but it also goes 1 story into the basement, and you can actually, it's not visible in this image, but on the other side, you can actually look down into the building and see that this is the foundation for the whole gallery, is this beautiful vault. There's also, here you can see, let me see if my cursor works. Here you can see the vault in the background. This is going to be the steps leading up to the big gallery. There's a theater here, and a research center that's happening over here, including an outdoor space for the creation of artwork on site. Just recently, they've started unveiling, the building opens on the 25th, everything opens on the 25th. So just recently, they've started unveiling some of the public commissions of artwork. This is Guda Shuna's new work. It is a Nuliayuk, or some of you may know her as Sedna, sculpture, but then the sort of back and front of the sculpture is a mother and a daughter, a mother teaching her daughter how to throat sing. It's a just beautiful piece. There's another fantastic work by Abraham Angik Rubin of a polar bear and her cubs. This is our curatorial team for Inua. I see I'm at my time now. So this is myself, we do this quirky thing where we like to sit from west to east or east to west. So from east to west, we're myself, Asiniak from Nunavut, Krista from Nunavut, and Kablusiak from the Inuit region, and we're working on a new exhibition, which we hope brings together a lot of the things that we have been thinking about. This is the architect's drawings of the space. I can't show you the actual installations because we are so close to opening and there's going to be a big public splash, I think. But just trust, this is what the space looks like, but the exhibition looks nothing like this. The designer, Michael Maltz, is a brilliant architect from based in LA. And then this is what he was looking at in the collections as a potential exhibition site, but we've done something totally different for this opening exhibition. And I'm going to conclude just by showing you a sneak peek of some of the works quickly. So here we are laying out what will turn out to be what has turned out to be a 3-story tall. The room itself, the new building is 40,000 square feet. The new exhibition space, this space, is 8,000 square feet alone. There are no straight walls in the entire room. Those are 8-foot skylights. There are 28 8-foot skylights with domed tops that just fill the gallery with light. You can see why Indigenous language keepers would look at this space and think about the quality of light and end up calling it the Sky Gallery or Kayak, because it's just an amazing space to be inside of. I can't wait till people can actually get in there. Here you can see the installation being planned as we kind of, did it like Tetris style on the floor before putting it up. Here's a detail of a wearable artwork by fashion designer Mata Kayak. Mata did this gorgeous Mountie that's just covered in sealskin flowers. And we love this one because it speaks to, and anyone who is based in Alaska probably also is tired of that, like the idea from outside that it's snow and cold 365 days a year, when in fact, our summers may be short, but they can be quite lush. And there's a lot of life and flora and fauna and things in the Arctic. So we're thrilled with this contribution. That's a commission. I can't show you too much of this one, but this is a sound and video installation by Lindsey Mcintyre, who we did a recreation of her Anunsiak's living room, and there's video playing on an old wooden TV, and then there's sound coming out of the radio on the left, and it's an image of her great grandmother on the right. There's a lot to this one, but I can't tell you anything about it. Zacharias Kunig's work is the exterior looks like it's a bit of a recreation of his hunting shack outside of Igloliote, but then inside it's a 4-channel video installation, and it starts with an oral history on the land and moves through into town, as you can see here, and then concludes very powerfully with excerpts in both English and Inuktitut of the consultations underway around the development of more resource extraction in the Arctic. It's a really powerful piece. It's a detail of a beaded fire pit by Shirley Morehouse, who's no Nazi Bumiat. Brian Adams, again, it was really important to us that we bring together and take away those sort of borders that exist throughout the, right now, the sort of exhibiting world, and to really bring artists from Alaska and Greenland together. We actually also had a Siberian Yupik artist in the show, and some of you may be interested to hear that we couldn't get the work across the border because of a sites issue, and then the artist ended up pulling the work from the show. And I think that there's going to be more to come on this, and there's already been so much about that particular issue, but we do have Alaska and Greenlandic artists in the exhibition. Here you can see that 30, I probably shouldn't show this image very long, but here you can see the 3-story long wall hanging installation. And then there's the sealskin space again behind Jocelyn Perinen, she's our Inuk project coordinator. She's the curator at the WAG. And I think it's important to note that we're not just a 4-person curatorial team. We also have an Inuit graphic designer. We have an Inuit exhibition designer, an Inuit project manager, and an Inuit educational assistant who's designing programming for youth. And so we really have tried to think much more expansively around how do we, it's bringing through that ethos of the Inuit Futures Project to get lots of people involved. It's the installation of a shipping container. There's a mural and a video inside by Glenn Gear. There's jewelry from the collections, ceramics from the collections. These are all Rankin Inlet ceramics, and more in group and work in the back. A doll installation, and I'm going to end and just escape my screen, but this is a work by My grandmother, Susanna Mixook, this is a beaded caribou hide bag, or obviously it's a detail of that bag, that was shared with me by someone who reached out to me over Twitter last year and just said, hey, do you, they said, hey, are you Susanna Mixook's granddaughter? I think my father bought something from the collection to, bought something from her years ago. And so he ended up being able to borrow it for the installation. And in fact, all of the curatorial team members have included works by their ancestors. And so Krista's got a work by her great grandfather in the exhibition. Luciak's grandmother contributed 2 dolls. Asiniak's great aunt has works that are in the installation as well. And then so does my grandmother, because we wanted to really talk about, continuities across not just in artistic practices, but also continuities in our connections to our intergenerational ancestry, and then, across all kinds of different works. So I kind of rushed through the end there because I know that I'm way out of time. So I apologize for cutting into the Q&A period, but I just want to say Nakami, and thank you for inviting me to come and share some of the work that I've been working on. And I'm really excited to see where things start to go, because the Arctic Art Summit, which is largely it's sort of a political and arts, maybe a bit of a soft power, like cultural diplomacy initiative is what it feels like, is to think about, like, can we do something different in the Arctic world than the models that seem to be presented to us by lots of other international exchanges between nations. And so I'm excited to see what comes out as every other year we have these Arctic Art Summits. What does this 16 years look like, and how does it change how we think about circumpolar art? So thank you, Nakami. Sorry, I went over my time.
Thank you, Heather, for that really thoughtful discussion and visually powerful presentation. Lots of amazing artwork. Yeah, thank you. We do have some time, guys, for some questions. If you'd like to visit with Dr. Igloliote, feel free to, I think Josh is opening up the chat box so you can type in there, or you should be able to unmute your mic here in just a second, or you can raise your emoji hand, again, just however you feel most comfortable.
The Q&A period made even more awkward by Zoom than it normally is. See if I can move out of the way of the museum here. It, of course, doesn't look like that right now. It's still cold in Winnipeg, but everywhere.
So Heather, I imagine there's a big event planned for later this month in conjunction with the opening?
Well, there is. So we've already had a ceremony in the building that we did I wish I could include video of it, but if you can tune into, I believe it's going to be televised on CBC on the 25th and then turn into it'll all be virtual as well. But we've already had ceremony in the building with all of the nations that have been involved in the naming of the various spaces. The ceremony took place in the spaces that were named. And one part of that was smudging the whole building. So if you can imagine that the big vault area, they had a smudge bowl that was, where was my camera? Like this big, and just a big sheet, and like the whole building filled with the most beautiful sage smoke. It was pretty amazing. And so there are performances and a guided tour, video tours, talks with the artists. We're going to be doing panels and all kinds of events, but also there will be a self-guided virtual tour that people could take throughout the exhibition, which is going to continue to grow and have new things added. The Inuit Futures group, all of the students, we have, I think 21 students right now, and most of them have contributed to the creation of the audio guide. And so instead of it being about the sort of Inuit curatorial voices taking primacy over anything else, we've really allowed the students to share their own perspectives on the work. So some of them have written poetic responses, some will include like art historical analysis or talking about the collections works, and others are, one student told a story. Like it's going to be really exciting. I'm so excited for people to get to hear it. How long has the building taken from concept to opening? Who led the charge to create it? Oh, that's a great question, Kristen. The building has been, I attended a consultation on it in 2012. And back then I walked away from the consultation thinking like, oh, they're just building a space, a new room, a new building to like a wing to house the collection in. So it's definitely, even though the idea for the building has been around for a long time, I think it was probably some years after that, that the potential of what it could really be it started to change pretty significantly. And so the Indigenous Advisory Circle has had a lot of influence and the ability to inform a lot about on how it's been changing and what it could be and how it could be a community space and how will Indigenous peoples feel welcome in that space. The building itself broke ground in 2018, and so it has been it's been a 2.5-year build, which is pretty great during a pandemic. The pandemic actually helped a little bit because the museum closed, but the construction work could still keep going. And so things are certainly not on the schedule that we thought. I thought it was going to be open, months ago, but I'm really happy that we're able to do something of an opening. It's not the thousands of people that we thought it would be on the opening weekend, but maybe we can do something big for the ending, depending how the vaccine rollout goes. I'm still keeping my hopes up.
We have another question in the chat here too. Do you see possibilities for the Inuit Futures program to be expanded into other circumpolar communities?
That's a great question, and it's certainly something that I think about. And it might be a part of what happens next, because I have and really enjoy working with my colleagues from around the circumpolar world. It's my new chair is Circumpolar Indigenous Arts, and it's not that I am an expert in that area, but that's where I'm really investing my research over the next 7 years. And so building those connections internationally, I think could be really important. And the model that we've developed, I know it's needed in other places, and I know it can work in other places because we share that same kind of, whatever term you want to call it, like mentorship and the supporting of young people and bringing up and centering them in our work. That is something that is shared around the circumpolar world and in many Indigenous communities. And so I know it can work. The grant that I have right now doesn't allow me to spend money that way. There's no reason why we can't have international partners, and we do, but the students need to be based in Canada. That's and I fought with them and I lost that battle, and I said, well, I still want the money and I'll do it on a limited basis if we can't do it on a large basis. But there is another, I think there are future opportunities where we could bring together institutions in a different kind of a way and just get a slightly different grant application going. And maybe there's people here who are interested. And I'm a very easy person to find on the internet because I'm the world's only Heather Igloliote. And so you can it's just heather.igloliote@concordia.ca. And if you are a part of an institution and you're interested in this in the future, I think that is something that's coming down the line. But so to answer your question, yes, but also I can't right now, or like there's no reason why we can't, but I just can't fund it in the same kind of way. So maybe there's something in the future that we can do. Oh, hi, Melissa. In seeing Indigenous arts is becoming more institutionally recognized, would you like to see exchange or collaborations in your projects between Alaska and subarctic artists such as the Dene and Athabascans, perhaps? Oh, that's a great question as well. And of course, I think that right now, again, it's the sort of parameters of the existing project, but we're already starting to think like there are limitations to this. We do a lot of work in the Northwest Territories and Inuit regions. And of course, there are lots of Dene young people there as well who would also be interested in this. And our hands are kind of tied in how we can support them. And I think that's a real loss. It's a loss of an opportunity and a loss of a chance to bring people together. And if a big part of the project is like not siloing us between countries and between peoples and to think about where we can share, I'm already seeing there's a lot of room for this project to expand and change and maybe to take on a bit more of a research focus as well. So we can really think about what do our institutions share and how could we be working together at shared projects and doing things in another kind of a way. So The answer is absolutely yes. Oh, thanks for posting the link, Amy. Please check out our website. More on the exhibitions and all the projects are coming. That would be great, Betsy. You send me a private message, please do. Anybody else?
Looks like we have
Great.
time for one or two more questions. Feel free, your mics should be able to be unmuted if you'd just like to open up your mic and your video as well. You're welcome.
Sveta asked about the artist, but I feel like I'm going to protect their privacy and not answer a direct question around who it was that couldn't participate. It was a big disappointment for everyone, I think.
Has there been one of a favorite piece that you, or an artist that you've enjoyed working with for the upcoming exhibition? Do you have a favorite?
Well, I mean, there's 91 works in the show and over 100, or 91 artists and over 100 works. And as we've been doing a lot of press lately, everyone's like, point out your favorite pieces. And I'm like, it's all, we love everything in the show. There's like really incredible collections works. We've commissioned 15 new works from across Inuit, Nunanga, and Greenland and Alaska. And we've also borrowed works from institutions from both other countries as well as across Canada. And so, you know, we're trying to do is like really change the scale and to have people think differently, to understand that Inuit art is sculptures and prints and drawings, but it's also media art, installation, video, drone photography, you know, wearable art, like all kinds of different things that are in the show. And I think that visitors are going to be really excited to see all of the sort of artistic productions that people who live in the North know that everyone is doing these things, but I think it doesn't always get to Southern centers in the same way. So I'm excited for those Inuit artists to see themselves recognized on this scale. And then I'm also excited for everyone else to understand all of the different things that are coming out of the Arctic and what an exciting contemporary art world we share. John, there is going to be a book for the exhibition, but we decided to wait, not to put it out for the opening, but to wait so that we could take a lot of installation shots. And I'm really glad that we did. It's like kind of a pet peeve of mine is catalogs that you can't see how the artworks were in relation together, because I do a lot of curatorial studies work. And so I'm excited to get to see them in context, you know. And it's actually, we wouldn't have done it if not for the pandemic, but I'm actually really happy about the virtual exhibition component, because as much as, you know, a show can be up for a whole year, but we're not traveling as much now. And we probably shouldn't be traveling quite as much in the future. I certainly travel a lot. And so trying to think through ways that we can be more accessible in our projects has been really exciting. And for anyone who's here from a museum, maybe you don't know this, I didn't know, but those cameras that you use to build virtual tours are only like $300. So like, it kind of blew my mind when I realized that we can actually do this. And like lots of like cultural centers can do this, little organizations, big organizations with tight budgets, you know. Like I was actually thinking, oh, this is something that's going to continue after this is all over. We're still going to be wanting to make our exhibitions more accessible. And, you know, when you try to search a website, like I've been looking for that, for some info on that catalog that I mentioned earlier, and to go online and see that there's like one image and a book cover and you can't see anything else online. So frustrating, because, you know, that's what we want our emerging scholars to be able to access, things that happened 10 or 15 years ago, you know, but we will be those people that they'll be going back to look at what was done previously. So I think making that all accessible is going to be really critical in the future. Well,
great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Igloliote. This was a wonderful presentation. And I think just your discussion is really speaking to the multidisciplinary approach of not only art history, but anthropology, all the social sciences, and just as we're trying to kind of embrace this more kind of holistic understanding, I think you've just kind of brought it together so well. And just thank you for sharing all of those great images. And we certainly are wishing you the best over the next couple of weeks. I imagine it's going to be a little bit crazy right up to the opening, but I hope it goes well for you and your whole team.